Can you imagine spending 30 years on death row and then coming out and writing a New York Times bestseller? I'm here with author Anthony Ray Hinton. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I got to tell you, and we've been talking before this, I don't think, no, I know I haven't, this is the best book I've read all year.
Thank you so much.
And it's riveting, so I would tell anybody to pick it up. Can we go back here a little bit, and then I want to move forward with a lot of stuff, but can we go back to July 31st, 1985? What you mentioned on page number 1 here, I mean, you just start us off the bat here, which is kind of interesting, where you say this: there's no way to know the exact second your life changes forever. You can only begin to know that moment by looking in the rearview mirror. So can we go back and look at the rearview mirror here just briefly? What happened in July?
My church that I belong to, Shiloh Baptist Church, we was going to have starting revival. And it was one of the hottest days, I believe, in Alabama in July. And like any other day, you get up and you're not thinking about going to jail. You're not thinking about anything.
It's a normal day.
Just a normal day. And got up in the evening and I went in the house to get some lemonade. And my mom asked me, was I going to revival? And I said, yes, ma'am. Got my lemonade, went on outside. 15 minutes later, I bring the empty glass back in the house. And she said, what time revival start? And I said, 7 o'clock, Mom. And she looked at me and she said, well, you got time to go out there and cut that grass. I dropped my head and I gave her that baby look. And I said, Mom, I promise you I'll cut that grass tomorrow. And my mom looked at me and she said, I'm trying my best to see how did you get you'll cut the grass tomorrow out of me telling you to go cut the grass. And she gave me that look only she could give me. And outside I went and I fired the lawnmower up. About 20, 25 minutes into cutting the grass, I just happened to look up and there stood 2 white gentlemen that I'd never seen before. And I cut the lawnmower off and I asked them, can I help you? And they said, yes, we're looking for Anthony Ray Hinton. I said, that would be me again, how can I help you? And one of them identified themselves as a detective from the Bessemer Police Department. And they told me they had a warrant for my arrest, and I said, for what? And they said, we'll explain that to you later. Right now, we want you to put your hands behind your back, and I complied. And after they put the handcuff on me, 30 years later, it's a nightmare. A nightmare. And when I finally realized on my way to jail, I kept asking them what was I being arrested for. And they never would tell me. And so I kept asking them. And finally, the last time I asked them, it seemed to piss the one off that wasn't driving. Excuse me. But he turned around, he said, you want to know why you being arrested? I said, yes. And he said, we're arresting you for first-degree robbery, first-degree kidnap, first-degree attempted murder. And I said, I ain't done none of that. And he shouted, let me tell you something right now. I don't care whether you did it or didn't do it, but I'm gonna make sure you found guilty of it. And I said, for a crime I didn't commit? He said, you must have a hearing problem. Didn't I just tell you I don't care whether you did it or didn't do it? He said, but don't you forget this. I'm going to make sure you found guilty of it. And as they drove just a little further, if he turned around and he said, and by the way, there's 5 things that are going to convict you. Would you like to know what they are? And I said, yes. He said, number 1, you're black. Number 2, a white man is going to say you shot him, whether you shot him or not. He said, I don't care. Believe me, I don't care. He said, number 3, you're going to have a white prosecutor. Number 4, you're going to have a white judge. And number 5, you're going to have an all-white jury. And he said, do you know what that spelled? And he said the word conviction 5 times.
Wow.
Conviction, 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 conviction. And I dropped my head. And finally we got to the police station and they put me in this room for about 2 hours. And then he came in and I said, detective, what date and time did this alleged crime take place, if you don't mind telling me? He goes in his folder and he look and he tell me a date and a time. And I said, thank you, Jesus. I did. I said, thank you, Jesus. I said, my supervisor is white. He could tell you I was at work that particular day in that particular time.
Yeah.
I felt so relieved because I figured he would go and talk to my white supervisor.
It's pretty simple.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
all
yes.
they do is do a little bit of digging. And you mentioned your white supervisor, just basically because back in that day and time, the white man, for the most part, would have got you off.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they goes and he tell them I was at work. They comes back about 4.5 hours later, and he said, I have good news and bad news. He said, the good news is we no longer going to charge you with first-degree robbery, first-degree kidnap, first-degree attempted murder.
Wow.
But we have decided, now who we is, we have decided that we're going to charge you with 2 counts of first-degree capital murder. I said, capital murder? I said, but I haven't killed anyone.
Yeah.
He said, didn't I tell you on the way here that I didn't care whether you did it or didn't do it? That still apply. And as we were sitting there talking, I said, but detective, I could never take a life. I said, I can't give a life back. I could never take a life. He looked at me and he said, I'm gonna tell you something. I truly believe you didn't do it. He said, but y'all is always taking up from one another.
And the y'all.
Yeah. He said, take this rap for your homeboy. And with tears coming down my eyes, I said, detective, I don't have a homeboy in this world that I would take a rap for like this. And I sit in jail for 1.5 years before I went to trial. And I never will forget the words. The judge read off the charges, asked me could I afford an attorney, and I told him no. He called an attorney up front, and the attorney, without even asking me my name, looked at me and he said, I did not go to law school to do pro bono work.
Yeah, I read that part in the book. And I mean, it was one of those riveting pieces that I read where my heart just went out big time because it just seemed like a sense of just hopelessness.
Yes, it was.
So when you heard you're convicted of this crime, you're headed to death row, your mom and your family, they're in the courtroom.
Yes.
What came to mind and how'd you feel?
The moment the judge say I sentence you to death, for a split second, I went blind. I looked around and I knew my niece was sitting behind me. And when I looked around to see her reaction, I couldn't see her at all. I couldn't see nothing but darkness. And as the moment I turned back around to face where the judge was sitting, it's like my eyesight came back. And I didn't want to hear nor see my mother in disbelief. And I kept wondering, did she hear them say, I sentence you to death? And all I was thinking about was her.
Wow.
And I kept thinking, how will my mother be able to get over this? Because I know in her heart, she knew she didn't raise a son that would even think about taking another human being life. And I kept asking, death.
Yeah.
Death for something that I know I didn't do, but more important, God know I didn't do it. And I wanted to go and I tried to turn to go and get my mom, but the bailiff put their arms up on my shoulder and led me out. And all that time I was just wondering, how was my mom? How is she taking it? Because I didn't care what they had said and done to me. It was my mother. Yeah. Just like she had protected me all of these years, I wanted to protect her and just say, Mom, it's gonna be okay. They're gonna straighten this out.
Wow.
But I never did get that chance.
You know, I don't want to give away too much of the book, so I want people to actually go read it, by the way. But so try to be careful here. But you get convicted of these 2 counts of capital murder. Your mom had a phrase that she would use that God cannot fail.
Absolutely.
You grew up in a Christian home. You're a Christian. Did you think that God failed you when you're sentenced for something that you didn't do?
Absolutely. To be honest with you, at that moment, I said, all of my life, my mom preached. My preachers would preach. God can do everything but fail.
Yeah.
He sit high, but he looks low.
Yeah.
And I said, well, where were you, God, when I needed you the most? Why did you allow this to happen to me? When you know that I never killed anyone, what is it, God, that I have done so bad that you turn your back on me? As the human side of us, we all question God when. And when I got to death row, when they sentenced me to death, and when I got to death row, I had a Bible. That's the only book they allowed you to have. I took this book that I had read all of my life, and I threw it up under the bed. And I said at that moment, God don't live here anymore. And I allowed the devil to bring what we all at some point in some time perhaps have, and that hatred. Because the first 3 years, all I could think about, how could I physically escape? And I wanted to go, not to escape to be on the run. I wanted to be on, to escape and choke the life out of the very men that had lied on me. That's all I could think about.
And there were 3 dark years during that time. You talk about in the book when the 3 years ended, that there was definitely can you explain what happened when those 3 years of darkness, and you're on death row? I mean, it's not the best place to be, especially for a crime that you didn't do.
Well, when I first got to Alabama, was in the process of executing 4 men, and death row is a place where everybody's there condemned to die.
There's a smell that comes with it.
Oh, yes. And so when they was executing the 3rd gentleman, I never will forget, I called this officer up to my cell. And I said, officer, is there anything you can give me where I won't have to smell that smell? And he looked at me and he said, no, there's nothing I can give you. He said, but if there's a consolation, you'll get used to it. And he took a step to leave. And then he came back. And he said, hey, and by the way, one day, somebody will smell your flesh burning. And I thought how cruel one could be to another. And with tears in my eyes, I sit on this bed and I looked at my body and I told my body that the mind had to leave. I said, in order for me to survive here, I got to escape here. And that's how I escaped up here. But what made me come back to life was, for the first time, I woke up to the sound of a grown man crying. A man that I had lived by for 3 years and never asked him his name, where he was from. I wasn't there to get to know anyone. I wasn't there to be friends with anyone. I knew I was there for something I didn't do.
Wow.
And I was there in a place of hell. And what have I done so bad that I deserve to be here? But the moment I heard, after 4 years of true laughter, I heard a real man laugh. And it just like it clicked something on. And I didn't look back after I heard this laughter. I decided at that moment that I was going to live. I decided at that moment I was going to ask God to come back into my life and teach me how to live within this confined box. And I wasn't worried about the box anymore. All I was worried about how to live within this box. And when I asked God to come back, it's like he came back and gave me a breath of fresh air. I began to laugh. I began to make other people laugh. I began to tell them, we may not be where we want to be. I know I'm not where I should be, but I thank God that we are here. Let's make the best of it. And what I was able to do that most people couldn't do. Every morning we woke up, I would say, hey, y'all, everybody alive, say I'm alive. And everybody would say I'm alive. And I said, now think about this today. Somebody with all the money in the world laid down last night but didn't wake up this morning. But here we are on death row. And we are alive and well. Think about it. I said, so that ought to show you that money cannot keep you alive. Here we are just condemned to die, but we're alive and well. And today we're going to enjoy today, for tomorrow is not promised.